Alright, let's do this. This is a tutorial on how to modify seeders and planters in Farming Simulator 19 to create tram lines. In real life, tram lines is something that is created by planters and seeders in order to get wheel tracks in the field to show where you can run your sprayer. In real life, seeders and planters create these tram lines by turning off sections where the wheels are supposed to go. So we will look at how to manually be able to turn off sections and turn them back on again, whether you want tram lines or not. So we will look at two different planters and seeders. We will look at the Väderstad A600 in-game seeder, and we will look at the Väderstad L16 planter in-game. We should have a plan and understand what we are modifying for this to work. And there's actually two different methods that I'm using depending whether the seeder or planter is a direct drilling machine or if it's a machine that requires tilling of the ground before you can seed, like the planter, for instance. So the A600 from Väderstad is a direct drilling seeder. In this case, we will use the existing sow area marked on this picture with sow 1. What we will do in order to create the tram lines is we will add two areas behind the sowing area that will actually cultivate the ground after it has been sown, and those two areas then becomes unseeded and thus will be tram lines. So that's method A for direct drilling machines. Then we have method B for planters and seeders without direct drilling that requires tilling of the ground. We could potentially use the method A on these as well. The only issue or non-realistic piece of that is that depending on if you're running on a plowed field texture in the game or if you're running on a cultivated field texture in the game, we really don't want to cultivate the areas like we did in method A, because that would destroy the plowed texture. So if you're running on a plowed texture, your tram lines will be cultivated, which is not realistic. We will instead divide the sowing area into 5 pieces, and we will sort of turn off area 2 and area 4 when we are creating tram lines and just not seed or plant anything in those areas, which then will be the original ground texture, whether it's being a plowed ground texture or a cultivated ground texture. It's also good to plan before you start editing the coordinates of these areas. So if we look at the coordinates in this case, you want to take care about to plan the width of the areas, like where does this area start and where does this area start and so forth. And I'll come back to this just in a second. So in order to save some time in this tutorial, I'm not going to type all the changes in the XML files or do the modifications. I have prepared everything beforehand because there's things that you actually need to change. So if we look at this, I have on the left side here I have the Tempo L16 planter, and on the right side here I have the Rapid A600 seeder. So if we look at the Tempo L16 first, if we start by at the top, and I have made comments as well to all the changes here, and I will make these files available in the description so you can download these changes and have them available. The first thing that we need to understand is that we need to create a new vehicle type. The default vehicle type for the planter is fertilizing sowing machine, actually this part here. So we will create a new vehicle type, and I just called it tram_fertilizing sowing machine. This vehicle type is defined in the moddesk file, and here's the section that does this. So we basically create a new vehicle type, we give it a name, and we tell which parent that we are using, and in this case the original type for the sowing machine. And the reason why we need to create a new vehicle type is that we need to use something called work mode in order to be able to switch between different work modes depending if we want tram lines or not tram lines. So this specialization is then added to the fertilizing sowing machine vehicle type. And we are then creating something called tram underscore fertilizing sowing machine, which includes everything here, but also the work mode. In ModDesk as well, we are also defining some text areas, and I'll come back to that, but this is text that actually shows up in the help box in-game to show you whether you have the tram lines off or on. So let's go back here. So this is the vehicle type then. If we then scroll down, we get to a section called ground reference nodes. So ground reference node is i3D file in Giants editor to show you what you need to fix and edit in the Giants editor. But ground reference nodes is basically the nodes that is referenced by the working areas. So these are the nodes that you move. So in the i3D file, in this case for the Tempo L16, we will need to find in the planter where the default ground reference node is, because that is the place where you want to create your new reference nodes as well, because this ground reference node is for sure placed in a part of the i3D file which is either lowered or lifted or somehow rotated when you lower or lift the seeder using the default V key, for instance. So we will find that ground reference node, and we can search this area to find it, but that might take some time. So one of the easiest things to do is actually scroll down at the i3D mappings and find the ground reference nodes. Ground reference node, find all in current document, and we'll scroll down, and here it is. So we can see that it is this node, 0, 3, 1. So we will look for 0, 3, 1. So this is 0, 0. This is 0, 0, 0. And this is 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. So we know it's in this section, hydraulics. And if I remember correctly, it was 03108. 031. This is 031. So we will go to this one. And it was 03108, I think. And there we have it. This is the ground reference node. And you can see that I have already created a new node here. So how do you do that then? Well, it's really simple. Just create the transform group. It will pop down here. Give it a name, like so. And then hold down your middle mouse button and drag it to the section you want it back on, in this case. Boom. And it turns up right here. So I'll delete that one again. I have already sort of created this for this example, so this is fine and dandy. Now let's go back to the XML file again and look at the ground reference nodes. So this is the default ground reference node, and we will keep that. We will use this ground reference node for the areas so 1, so 3, and so 5 that we will not touch. These will always be, unchanged. They will only lift and lower when you lift and lower the planter. But sowing area 2 and 4 we need to change so that even when you lower the planter, these will not sow anything if you are turning on to create tram lines. We will add this reference node, which I called sow 2 and 4 reference node. So this will be the reference node for those two areas. Then we come to the section of the work areas, and by default this planter has only one working area. It doesn't have any ridge markers or anything else. In this case we remove that work area and we define 5 new work areas. So 1, so 2, so 3, so 4, and so 5. And each of these contain a start node, a with node, and a height node. And these work like this. So every area has a start node. This is the coordinates of this corner. And a with node, which is the coordinates of this corner. And it has a height node, which is the coordinates of this corner. And the same for sow area 2. Start node, with node, and a height node. So that's why it's pretty good to actually have a sort of a plan on what the coordinates should be. In this case, I've only labeled the x coordinates, but because they are the ones that change the height coordinate, and the coordinate for that is not used. Basically, the y-axis is the same. And so these areas, so these nodes, is also something that you need to define in the i3D file. And there is a section, usually, or should be, a section called work area. It has the default work area here. Although we are not using this in this example, I'm still leaving them in here. I have to delete them. But I've created the 5 new areas. And what I've done is that I've created a top node that's just called so1. And within each of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've created the start, width, and height nodes. That makes it easy for me to adjust sort of height position in the position in this orientation z-axis without actually having to change all 3 by just changing this one. So here I have start, which is 6 at x, and it goes to width of 1.8. Observe that this is the coordinates, it's not the actual width. The width is 6 minus 1.8. That is the actual width, but it's the coordinates of that corner of the area. And then the height node, which is at coordinate 6, but in coordinate z it's -1, so it is 1 meter more back than the start section, which is if we look at it like this. This is the start section, and this is the height section. And if we look at it from this angle, this is the start section, and this is the width. So these I create, and you create this the same way as I showed you before. Create a transform group, or actually create 4 of them, and pick these 3, hold down middle mouse button, drop them across this one, and you get that one. Then take this one, hold down your middle mouse button, and move it over to your work area here. And then you can move them around or change the coordinates so that they are positioned the way they should to define the 5 work areas that you want in this case. So the other important part of this is the ground reference node. And this references back to the line ordering in this section of ground reference nodes. So this work area will use the first ground reference node, this one. The second area, again going back to the plan here, this is what we need to modify to create tramlines or not. This will go back to the second line of the ground reference node, which is the 2 and 4 reference node. And then we're back at the area 3, which is the middle area, using the ground reference node again. Here we use the second ground reference node, which is the 2 and 4 reference node, and back to the first reference node. So this is the 5 areas defined. The next section that we need to take care about is the work modes. And this is something that's not part of the original planters either. This comes from the specialization that we added in ModDesk for the newly defined vehicle type. And this actually gives us the ability to switch between work modes, either sort of a default work mode, like this section, or a work mode that you enable with an input key binding. And work mode _ middle is actually something that turns up in the game as Control Y, at least on PC. If this happens to end up in console, it will be something else on the console, but it has a default key binding even on console. What we do actually in these work modes is to use an animation to change the sowing areas, the seeding areas. And the reason for that is that these files, these XML files, does not support object change. So you cannot modify the object by object change. So we actually use an animation, not for any animation, but to actually be able to modify a node or an object in the i3D file. So we kick off an animation that I've called tramlines, tram_lines. And for the work mode that I called all areas, I'm kicking off the animation tramlines in a forward speed of 1, and I'm going to stop time of 1. And in this section, this work mode which I created called create_tram_lines, we run the same animation, but we run it backwards. We put it at speed -1 and a stop time of 0, so it runs the same animation, but it runs it backwards. And these names create tram lines and all areas. They are L10N actions. So you need to define a text for these L10Ns. And the all areas we are just putting into the help section that tram lines are off. And for the text name create underscore tram underscore lines, we simply put in tram lines on. So this is what this does. So let's go down and see the animation part. So here's the animation that we have. It doesn't do any animation per se, no visible animation in this case. We're only changing this ground reference node that I talked about, that I bound to area 2 and 4 up here, by actually telling that this area 2, which is the SO2 thing, uses the ground reference node index 2, which is the second, this guy. And the same for area 4 also uses the same ground reference node. So in the animation, I'm modifying that node. Actually, if you're thinking about what we did above, we are doing this animation forward from 0 to 1 when we don't want tram lines, which means that the end translation, the coordinates for this node, should match what we actually have in the i3D file here, because that's when this section is in its default state. This is then obviously modified with the V key when you raise or lower the planter, but this is what we enter as the ending position, which means that the area 2 and 4 will be in ground and actually doing its work. Now when we play this animation backwards from 1 to 0, we are going from this translation over to the start translation. So this node will actually be lifted from, instead of being at a position of minus 0.8, we lift it, this is the y-axis, we lift it to 1 meter above the ground instead of 0.8 meters below. And that means that it will be these two areas that are bound by this ground reference node will be not doing any work. So that's basically the whole function of it. The only other part that we need, obviously, for this is to define the i3D mappings of all of new nodes that we created. The SO2 and 4 reference node, obviously, and the node name for that one, and then all the area nodes. We actually don't need to define the SO1 and SO2 parts because we are not using them, but just as easy to do that, and it follows, since I did the start with and hate nodes as children of SO1, it's really easy. This is 063, which means that this becomes 063, all of them, and then 012. And then the next one will be 064, 065, 066, 067, and 012, and so forth. So it's really easy. So it follows a very clear pattern. Now, so this is it, basically. This is what we need. So let's have a look in the game. Now, so here's the planter that we have. We can run around like this. Right now, as you can see, the tram lines are off. We turn the planter on, like so, and we lower it, and it starts planting. In this case, I'm on a plowed ground. And if I press left Ctrl Y, you can see that the text changes to tram lines on, and you can see the ground actually changes to have tram lines on. And we'll run it like this, and we'll turn around, turn off the tram lines again. So here, as you can see, here are the tram lines that we just created, and you can use this when you run your sprayer to actually know where to run. So that was the planter. Now let's look at this other piece, method A for direct drilling seeders, which is actually sort of in theory easier, but a little bit more work in the files, to be honest. I have this on my right side here, Rapid A600. We need to create a vehicle type again, like we did the first time. This is a sowing machine, so it doesn't do any fertilizing, so it's just, instead of fertilizing sowing machine, it's tram_sowing machine. And in this case, we need two specializations added for this. We need to add the possibility to cultivate ground by adding the cultivator specialization as well as the work mode one, and create this vehicle type that has the sowing machine as a parent. And then we have the L10N text here as we did in the previous example. Now, if we scroll down to the ground reference nodes, yeah, first of all, here's the cultivator section. It's pretty straightforward. It's just, you can copy paste it from any cultivator basically and just give it a direction node that tells in what direction to actually cultivate it. But in the ground reference node section, we, in this seeder, have a few more things. We have the default ground reference node, and we have the nodes, ground reference nodes for the ridge markers, because this is a seeder that has ridge markers. So we will leave these as they are as well. But since we are putting in a new ground reference node here, same as in the previous part, but I'll call it cult 1 and 2. And this is because we are gonna cultivate the areas here behind the sowing area in order to create the tram lines. So this is the cult 1 and 2 reference node. This means that the ground reference nodes for the ridge markers will change, and we will need to change them down here as well when we define our new areas. So this is the default area, and in this example we're not touching this one. This is using the default nodes for start width and height, and it seeds the entire width of the seeder. The cultivator part is something that we define in the i3D file as previously, as we also need to define the reference node, like so. So we have here cult1 start, cult1 width, cult1 height, and the cult2 parts as well in the similar fashion. And this references back to the first line in the ground reference node, this one. These two cultivator areas references back to the second line, which is the cult1 and 2 reference node that we should create in the i3D file using Giants Editor. And these ridge markers reference the line 3 and line 4 here, which is 1, 2, line 3, and line 4. So that's our work area. Now, the work mode section is basically the same as we had in the planter. We define two work modes: all areas and create_tramlines. And again, these defines text here under L10N section on what to actually show in the help menu when we have tramlines off or on. And the purpose of these work modes is to kick off the animation, tram_lines, either going in a forward speed or in a reverse speed and ending at 0. And again, this is not really an animation, it's just to manipulate the cultivator areas. The animation is this part, and we are actually modifying two part nodes here. And this is a little bit different than the other one, because we cannot lift the cultivator parts as we lifted sowing areas in the planter example that we used. And the reason why we can't lift these is that because if you lift these cultivator sections when you don't want to cultivate, the seeder will actually lose the visual dust effect. So it will not, give any dust when you run it on the field. And so they have to be in the ground in order to create that visual effect in the game. So what we do instead is that we move them on the Z-axis, so that they, instead of when we create tram lines, we cultivate behind the sowing area. When we don't want tram lines, we move these cultivator areas forward to actually be in front of the sowing area, which means that the sowing area will be what is left behind after the seed. So instead of go to this animation, we run it forward and we end up at end time 1. We actually have an end translation of the cult1 and cult2 nodes, which again, these, I'll show you, to be honest, it's much better. We'll find here the work areas here. So I've created the cult1 reference node, which is here where the ground reference node is, because that's the part that's lifted and lowered with the seeder, and in the same section as the work area. So this is a little bit different between each planter and seeder. The L16 actually angles the rear part when it lifts, so that's why the ground reference node is in a different section of the i3D. But here I created a cult1 and the cult2 with start, width, and height. So these parent nodes here is what we actually change in the animation and move them so they are placed here by default. And what I do when I turn off the tram lines is that I move them forward like so. And that will move all of these forward. So the entire area is moved forward when I move this parent node. These are the nodes that I move, and I move them from a position of 1 on the z-axis to a position of -1 on the z-axis. So this is the translation that we have when we create the tram lines. And the last part that we need to look at is the I3D section. Again, this is what it looks like, the cult1 and 2 reference node. And then the cult1 start, width, height, cult2 start, width, and height. In this case, we actually use these parent nodes, cult1 and cult2. With the planter, we actually did not use these nodes because we manipulated the ground reference nodes instead and lifted them up when we didn't want them to be in the ground. Now we need to move these areas forward and backwards instead. So we're actually manipulating these parent nodes in our animation section like that. So let's go to the game and look at how this works. Turn it on and we lower it. And now in this case you can see I have tram lines on. If everything is nice and dandy, we should get tram lines. And we do. You can see we are getting tram lines. And as you can see in this example, we are running on a plowed ground texture, but we are leaving a cultivated tram line section. And that is okay with this direct drill machine because this has a tilling area in the seeder that actually tills the ground. So even though we're not seeding per se as in real life the sections where we want the tram lines, it will still be tilled by the cultivator area of the seeder. Looks pretty nice. So that is everything that I need to explain about this. As I said in the beginning, I will leave the download links to these commented sections for you to download so you can use them to look at or copy paste from or whatever you want. Good luck.